Really decent payrolls report in the view of so many people. Your perspective, please, sir, first of all.
Yeah. No, it was a good report. I think the couple things that I'm very happy to see in the private sector, we're seeing employment back to pre-pandemic levels. In the manufacturing sector, same thing. In the child care sector, for the first time, quite honestly, in a little bit, we've seen some gains, which means that our child care facilities are getting a little bit back to, I wouldn't call them back to where they were pre-pandemic, but we're seeing some growth there. Warehousing and obviously manufacturing, we've seen some great growth there as well. So we're seeing our job economy moving forward. The wage growth, we're seeing the biggest, well, some of the biggest gain in the lowest income earners, which is good. Obviously, we're still dealing with inflation, and the wage growth isn't quite keeping up with inflation. But I think what we want to do is actually bring inflation down. So we have to continue to move forward. But this shows that where the country is, with President Biden laying out the plans when he took office, is still moving forward on the job side. But as you just mentioned, there's still a lot of unanswered questions about the economy. It's still kind of in a very, interesting place.
Secretary Walsh, I've relied on you over the last few months to give me updates on what's happening on the West Coast. I understand the contract with the West Coast Port Union expired and talks are ongoing. You've said a few times on this programme that you're not concerned. Are you concerned now?
No, I'm not concerned because both parties put a statement out, two statements now, letting people know that they're going to continue negotiations when the contract expires July 1st. I've spoken, I didn't speak to them this week, I spoke to both sides last week. They both said it's moving in the right direction, both sides, I should say, the unions and the companies. And obviously we haven't had that issue yet that might pop up that will cause a little indigestion for both sides, but I like where it's going. The interesting thing about this negotiation, it doesn't start until 6 weeks prior to the expiration of the contract, and that's one of the things that, a little different than most contracts. Some contracts you can start negotiation at 6 months prior to expiring, but I feel good where we're going. I know there's a lot at stake. Clearly, we don't want to have any issues like we did last holiday season and last fall with boats out with ships out in the harbor and not getting supplies in. So I do feel good where we are during today.
Secretary Walsh, as you know, this is a really important topic, and I can take your word for it that you feel good, but other members of the audience might not. Can you help them understand what's at stake here and the details of the negotiations? What's stopping this one from closing? What's the gap? How big's the gap, and what's it over?
Yeah, so just so everyone understands, when they do the negotiation on the port, they generally go on for long periods of time. And historically, under I think 2014, it went on for a long time. There was no strikes or slowdowns or lockouts. But what we want to do right now, in the time that we're living in, making sure that people's pressure, they feel the pressure, price pressures at home, they're paying for goods and services, where they're seeing inflation obviously impacting their families. I want to make sure, and President Biden wants to make sure, that we don't have a breakdown negotiation at the port to add additionally to inflation, additionally to costs. And that's what's at stake, quite honestly. And the contract that they're negotiating is everything from wages to working conditions to everything that you can imagine. So it's a massive contract. There are tens of thousands of workers. There are 9 shipping companies involved in this negotiation. So it's a very long negotiation. Well, I shouldn't say long. It's a very, very challenging negotiation at the table. But when I hear from both sides the same exact thing, that it's moving along, I'm pleased with that. I'm not concerned about the contract expiring on the 1st of this month.
Sure.
Certainly, next month I come on this show. If we don't have a contract and we're not close to a contract, then you and I might be having a very different conversation. But right now I feel good.
Well, let's talk about that. As you know, you can't take their word for it either. Are you preparing for the possibility of a strike? Can you continue to talk to me about what those preparations look like?
Yeah, I'm really not concerned about strike. The last time there was a strike at the ports of L.A. and Long Beach, it was in 1972, I believe. So we haven't had a strike there in quite some time. And the way I look at this, these workers and these shipping companies and these suppliers and everyone working at the port, particularly the workers, they've lived through and worked through a pandemic like a lot of us have. They went to work every day. They were still unloading ships. The supply chain issues or the shortages at the ports weren't necessarily because they weren't unloading the ships. It was because the manufacturing stopped in China. They shut down manufacturing just like they did earlier this year. So workers want to go to work. If workers don't work, they don't get paid. They're not a salaried bunch of people. If they don't work the hours, they don't get paid. They're hourly workers. And that's why for them, there's an interest for the people that work on the ports to make sure this contract gets resolved and they continue to work.
Secretary Walsh, just quickly and briefly, and I respect your time, and I just want to squeeze this in. You mentioned China. The president, we understand, will be meeting with advisors today to consider removing tariffs on China. We've been told many times over the last few years from the previous administration and this one that a lot of this is about fairness and also protecting American jobs. Do you have a seat at the table in that conversation?
No, I'm not necessarily at the table. I've been involved in some conversations, and I think that, I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen today at the White House.
What's your view on it? What have you said back to them?
I mean, I think it's above my pay grade as far as where I am right now. But I think that I think having this conversation is really important because we're thinking about the pressures of inflation, but we're also got to keep an eye on the jobs that are here in the United States. And the president has certainly laid out in the beginning of his presidency a big opportunity to create more opportunities in manufacturing in the United States of America. One thing that's indirectly related, the Bipartisan Innovation Act that's in front of Congress right now, that's an important piece of legislation to pass. Because that would allow us the opportunity to build more in America and have more products built in America. Some of what we're seeing right now in America is the computer chips that are in all of our phones and our doorbells, and we're doing it right now on TV. We should be making those in the United States of America. That's an opportunity for us to help relieve long-term inflationary pressures down the road.